Good morning. Yep, that's right. It's me, Uncle Lou, live for you on LouTube today. Yep, thanks for watching. First off, right off the bat here, I want to thank everybody who watched and called in to the return of the live show yesterday. Tell me how you feel. It went way better than I thought it would. After taking such a long time off from that show, I wasn't so sure how it would go yesterday. I thought it might take a few weeks to get the show back up and running with consistent callers and listeners and activity in the comment section and stuff like that. But we picked up right where we left off last time. I really appreciate you guys calling in. As soon as I hung up, the phone was ringing with the next call. And that's what makes that call-in show. Without that, I wouldn't do the call-in show. If it, there's no point in me doing that if it's just me talking. So, in order for me to do it, I've got to have you guys calling in. So thank you to everyone who called in. I'm sorry to the ones of you that that tried to call in and couldn't get through. We're going to do it again at the same time next Monday. If it goes as well next Monday as it went this Monday, then I think I'm going to add a second show at a different day and different time, so that maybe some other people who aren't able to call in on Mondays in the afternoon will have a chance to call in. So thank you to everyone who called, watched, typed in the comments, listened, everything. Thank you. Now I've done my 5 prediction videos for the 5 different conferences. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to do my conference rankings, 1 through 5. Okay. Now this isn't last year, or this isn't over the last 10 years. This is how I think the conferences will stack up against each other for this year, this coming year, 2017. So with that being said, let's get into it. All right, we're going to start at the bottom, work our way up. Started from the bottom, now we're here. 2 Chainz got me a few on. Well, I don't know. I don't know why I did that. Anyway, we're going to start at the bottom, work our way up. Yep, that's what we're going to do. So, look, you probably already know if you watched the prediction videos, but the worst conference this year in the Power 5 is going to be the Big 12. Oklahoma really was the only elite team in that league, and with Stoops leaving, they're a little bit of an unknown this year. Lincoln Riley has been there, so it's not like he's somebody new. But until we see him go out and coach some games and see how the team reacts to him and things like that, we just don't know what we're going to get with Oklahoma this year. Texas, I think, is improving with Tom Herman, but they're still a couple of years away, I think, in my opinion, of being any sort of legitimate national threat. I'm high on Oklahoma State this year. I've picked them to win the Big 12, but I don't think they're an elite team. And if you watch the previews, that I think the Big 12 is getting left out of the college football playoff again this year, so we got to put them at number 5. Big 12 also has the worst team in college football, which is Kansas, or the worst team in the Power 5. Kansas hasn't won more than 3 games in a season in like 5 or 6 years, or something like that. I think they've only won a total of 12 or 13 games over the last 5 or 6 years. They're just terrible. Now, Rutgers, I think, was 0-12 last year. So maybe you can make the argument that Rutgers was worse last year than Kansas was. Kansas also beat Texas last year, I think. May have been the year before. But Kansas is, in my opinion, Kansas is the worst Power 5 football program in America. They reside in the Big 12. Baylor has fallen off the map. TCU and Texas Tech are average at best. So I just think they're the worst team. Now, right above that, you've got the Pac-12. They did make the playoff last year with Washington. Washington was a good team last year. They got throttled by Alabama in round 1 of the playoffs. But let's be real, plenty of teams get throttled by Alabama. That doesn't necessarily mean you're not a good team if you get waxed by Alabama. But they just don't have the quality of depth out there that the top 3 conferences have. I think Southern Cal will be a good team this year. Stanford, I think, will be a little bit better this year than they were last year. Washington State's not a terrible team, I guess. But UCLA, California, both the Arizona schools, Colorado, I think, won 10 games last year. But raise your hand if playing Colorado would scare you. Nobody? No hands? Okay. So I've got the Pac-12 at 4th. Now, it gets a little bit more difficult when you get 3-2-1 here. But for number 3, I've got to go with the Big Ten. Now, last year, all we heard all year long was that the Big Ten was miles ahead of every other conference. You know, they were leaps and bounds, head and shoulders above the rest. Then bowl season came around. Clowns couldn't win a game. Was it Ohio State in the playoffs? Couldn't even score a point against Clemson. Year before, wasn't it? Michigan State got shut out in the playoffs. So I've got the Big Ten at 3. They do have a couple of elite teams, in my opinion. Penn State, Ohio State. Michigan, I think, takes a step back this year. I know Harbaugh's a good coach and has put a lot of recruiting classes together. But they lost 18 starters off of the team last year. So if Michigan was going to make a run, to me, last year would have been the year to do it. How has Michigan never played in the Big Ten title game? But anyway, I digress and regress too. Michigan State had a couple of years. I mentioned they made the playoffs a couple of years ago, but they won 3 or 4 games last year or something. Nebraska, sort of a middle-of-the-road team. Northwestern, Indiana. These teams aren't really scaring anybody. So I've got them at 3rd. Now, they have a bunch of teams ranked in the preseason polls up really, really high, but the problem is a different verse same as the first. Seen all this last year. Big Ten dominated the polls, like I mentioned, all year long, and bowl season came around and couldn't win a game. I think they were like 3-7 or something like that in bowl games when they had to play other good teams. So, the fact that they beat up on each other during the season and then get humiliated in bowl season just shows me they're not all that good, to be honest. And people are going to say, well, Lou, that's what you say about the SEC, that they just beat up on each other, and that means that they're so good. Yeah, but when bowl season comes around, the SEC dominates 9 times out of 10, so nice try. Try again, though. Yeah. Even last year, which was a down year for the SEC, we had 6-7 bowl wins, something like that. Yeah, we had to. Okay, so number 1 and number 2, this is where some people are going to get a little bit pissed off, I think. I'm putting the ACC at number 2. Now, if you were watching me last year, you know that all year long, I said SEC was the best conference. At the end of the year, I had to flip-flop it. I did a mea culpa. Uncle Lou speaks Latin. You can Google mea culpa if you need to. Some of you might even need to Google Latin. I don't know. But anyway, I came out at the end of the year and I said, yes, the ACC was the best conference last year. And I still believe that. I think the ACC was the best conference last year. But like I mentioned in the beginning, this is my predictions for what's happening this year. And I think the ACC finishes number 2. I do not think Clemson will be as good as they were last year. I still think Clemson is an elite team. They're loaded with NFL players, especially on defense. But they're not replacing Deshaun Watson. So I think they take a step back. By a step back, I mean 10-2. 9-3 at the worst. Could very possibly be 11-1. I picked Florida State to win the ACC. So obviously they're an elite team. Louisville, they have Lamar Jackson, but not much else. They're going to score a lot of points against a lot of the teams that they play, but I don't think Louisville is an elite team. Look at last year, they lost to Kentucky, for Christ's sake. Anyway. And Louisville also beat Florida State like 110-2. Yes, they did. Criminals. So I've got them at number 2. Georgia Tech, they're going to win their usual, 8 or 9 games, but they're not going to do anything of any significance or relevance. That goes without saying. And no, they're not beating UJ this year. That's just not happening 2 years in a row. They've only beat us 3 times this century. So no, they're not beating us again this year. NC State, I think, is going to be an improved team, but still nowhere near elite. North Carolina is going to take a step back, I think. Their defense is still going to be terrible. They lost Trubisky, so who knows what's happening there. And then they've got some of the worst teams around. Pitt, Virginia, Wake Forest. Nobody's afraid of these teams. Yeah, Pitt did beat Clemson last year. Actually, take Pitt off that. I can't lump Pitt in with Wake Forest and Virginia. They're a step above that. But Miami, another team, I think that's on the rise. But until their head coach proves to me that he can win meaningful games on a consistent basis, football Jesus, then they're not elite. So I've got Clemson, the ACC coming in at 2. Of course, that leaves the ACC number 1. Oh, I'm losing SEC homer. Well, yeah, you're right. I'm not going to deny it. I am an SEC homer, but Alabama, obviously an elite team. I think LSU will have a good year. Auburn, if Jarrett Stidbaloni's any good, has potential to be an elite team, and somebody has to win the East. Spoiler alert, it's Georgia. Yeah, Georgia's coming. Get out of the way. Get steamrolled if you don't. Yeah, without a problem. Florida, they'll have another good year. They have a really favorable schedule. Florida's going to win, 8, 9 games, 10 games at least. So, yeah, even South Carolina, I think, is going to have a better year than they had last year. So that's just the way it has to be. Ole Miss will be terrible. No one cares about them. They're irrelevant. Sanctions and more coming. Yeah. So, Tennessee taking a step back. Arkansas, who cares? They'll win 7 or 8 games like they always do. People love Brett Bielema out there. I don't know why. Dude looks like Grimace from the old McDonald's commercials. Anyway, there it is. SEC, ACC, Big 10, Big 12. No, Pac-12, Big 12. You tried to confuse me at the end. SEC, ACC, Big 10, Pac-12, Big 12. That's the conference rankings preseason. I reserve the right to change that later in the year.